Hello, and welcome to the February 1st weekly JupyterLab call. Today we have 20 people on the call. If you're just joining, please find the agenda in, oops, that's a PR, in the chat. Let me paste the real link instead of the link to the PR. And please sign in if you haven't already. And if you'd like to talk about something for about 5 minutes, just add a bullet point in the agenda. And if you got something longer than that, add it at the additional discussions near the end. And why don't we begin? First up on the agenda is Fred.
Hello, everybody. Weekly update on JupyterLab 3.6.0. Big thanks to Mike for solving the style issue I've seen in the release candidate one. I think we are good to go. So this is the right time to tell me if it's not, if somebody has seen a blocker. Otherwise, I linked some draft post that usually is posted on Discord when we do a minor release. Feel free to place your comment directly on the HackMD and put your name in front, maybe, so I know who has put some comments if it's something longer than T-post.
The weird blue formatting issue, I think Michal solved it, and I commented on the PR, and I think that the PR seemed to have fixed it, but I don't know if it was merged and if it was backported to 3.5, because that looked really ugly. Did that go in? Did that end after the RC?
Was it also on 3.5? I did not check. It was only on 3.6.
Let me find the number. Let me find the number and give you the number. I'll post the link in a second. Let me just find it.
Okay, thanks.
I believe it only affected 3.6 release candidate 1. So we are good to go.
Say what, Mike? Can you repeat? I couldn't understand you, sorry.
Mike was saying that the PR that made the change but the focus was only on 3.6, and the PR to fix it was targeting directly that branch. So okay. I will have a last check just before hitting release, just to be sure on the branch. But
sure.
Okay, then I think we are good to go. So I will release it tomorrow, just because it's late already for me today, so that I'm awake enough for doing that. Okay, thanks, Mike. I will look then at the issue you just mentioned. And we'll just move on the other points so that we have time for the triage. So I'm coming back to the point I raised last week. So for 4.0, we're gonna extract everything that's related to collaboration UI element in a separate project. And the work has started to move that code in Jupyter Server White Doc. That project was already existing because it was providing the backend for collaboration element. And so the question I raised last week, and there's an issue on the tip compass, that's the link-related discussion. It's should we move it on the JupyterLab GitHub organization? Because basically now it starts to be really related to JupyterLab and Notebook 7, of course. But yeah, and if there is a consensus today, then we can directly move on. Otherwise, I will trigger a vote as described in the process. So I don't know if maybe if there are enough people from the council tonight, or if people have already arguments.
Yeah, well, okay, so does anyone have an objection? I'll wait a second for that, and if not, maybe we could do one of the thumbs up, thumbs down things and see what the temperature is. Any thoughts?
Actually, I have a clarifying question so everyone has context. Fred, this is a required package in JupyterLab for real-time collaboration, right?
Yeah, so the idea is that we will not have the flag collaboration or collaborative anymore, but you will have to install that one to enable collaboration. And so that's mean that when using when installing JupyterLab 4, it won't be in. And so you also don't have like, for example, the file ID service. But if you decide to say, I want RTC, then you will need to install that package and it will pull all the dependency, including, for example, server file ID.
Got it. Can we make an optional install namespace for pip for like our square brackets RTC, something like that?
Yeah, sure. I think we can definitely do that, and probably maybe we can also do something on Conda4 to have a secondary output.
Got it. Okay, so but it's RTC. Those capabilities won't work without this, though. I'm just trying to.
Yeah, RTC itself won't work. The only thing that's still in core that's related to RTC is the data model that's needed. So we will of course always use the YGS model, and of course we will use the identity that come from the Jupyter server for free because it's the best way to do.
In terms of potential loss of functionality, I just want to understand if that package is not installed, is there anything in the single user experience that might be powered by the RTC machinery that is lost? For example, opening the same document in two different views and beginning to have overriding issues or things like that. I think like if the single user experience ends up inadvertently relying on things that are implicitly managed by the RTC machinery, and people end up with really weird surprises in the UX, that might make it worth reconsidering. I just want to understand what the impact would be on sort of normal things that people these days kind of expect of everyday applications to do.
The multi-view concept with RTC on is is quite complex. I don't think it's gonna break the single user experience. Knowing that even with RTC there is a known limitation is, for example, if the two view of the document are not using the same model. So sorry, it's going to be a bit technical, but for example, if you open the notebook with the notebook view, and if you open the same notebook with the file editor, for example, if you use RTC, it's not going to work because the delta are not consistent between them. So if it should at least be even in RTC the two same view, and I don't think there are gonna be some trouble with the. I think there is less risk of a trouble in the single user experience, as we will use what we were using, like what you are using for since JupyterLab 2 or even 1, I think.
So the difference though is without that installed, the in-memory state of the document is in the client, in the front end, not in the server, correct?
Sorry, yeah.
So when we fix this long-standing issue of outputs not showing up when you disconnect, that will not work in the single user experience without this installed.
Yes.
That has been one of the longest and like most severe complaints of people about Jupyter. Like literally, we've been hearing that one for 10 years and we've been telling people it's going to be fixed one day, it's going to be fixed. Relegating that to a secondary, like non-standard installation seems like an issue to me. At least it would give me pause.
Actually, it's still not fixed in RTC neither.
So but my question then is, do we expect to fix that during the 4.x release cycles? And if so, I think that's a reason to consider having this be the default. Like it should still work without it, but if we can fix that long-standing bug in the 4.x series without API breakage, I mean, it literally is the top bug in all of Jupyter.
Yeah, but I think then the path for now splitting and then maybe later merging for example, for that specific issue, it's the good path. But yeah, as Jason commented on the chat, that means having some state on the server side, and yeah, it's gonna be not so easy to introduce.
Do you see that maybe happen? Do you see that? Sorry, I don't know if I can hear it. Yeah. Do you see that maybe happening in 5.0 then? Maybe in 4.0 we have a separate package, and 5.0 we have that in core.
I'm probably lacking the all knowledge on the kernel side, because that's basically the trouble for now with the output, is that we send from the front end the request to execute, and then it's only the guys that has asked for execution that will get the reply from the kernel. And so when you get the reply, it creates the output, and then the output will be sent to the RTC machinery to dispatch the update of the document to everybody.
William, of course, has lots of things to say about this. He's been struggling. I mean, not struggling. He's been working and implementing this for years now.
I'll just say,
go ahead.
Without changing, I'm sorry.
it's hard and you guys can do it, so do it. But my number one remark is make sure you try to add in some sort of logging beyond what's there, so that inevitably when issues arise, you can get more than it's broken. You can get like some actual trace of what happened. People can provide you something, and then you can, you know, kind of fix it. So that's my comment.
Like, could we have like a future version of Jupyter where this is clearly like a 5.0 feature without modifying the kernel messages at all? Instead, we modify the way RTC notebooks work, where all RTC notebooks they instruct the backend client, the backend RTC client, to be the one that talks to the kernel. And so that way, anyone connected to the server is going to get that information. And you don't use the front end to send execute requests to the kernel. You use the front end to say, I want an execution. Then that tells the Jupyter server YDoc package or whatever the future version of that is to ask the kernel. And so that way, every single output's always caught by the server.
For what it's worth, that's exactly what CodeCalc does. Like any random client just changes something saying, I would like this cell to be executed. And then the backend server tells the kernel to actually do the execution. But it's a little tricky to do efficiently. There's a whole bunch of subtleties there, just making sure that you don't sort of waste time in the back and forth that's involved. For a while, it felt pretty laggy in CodeCalc the way I had done that.
Okay, Mike brings up a great point, though. The question at hand is, can we move this package from Jupyter Server to JupyterLab on github.org? I can't believe I said .org.
Should we be voting with thumbs up, what you're saying?
Yes, please vote thumbs up if you agree with this, and thumbs down if you do not. Sorry, I should have clarified.
While people vote, I think it would be helpful for us to open a team compass on this other question of what should the default behavior be for JupyterLab 4? I think it's yeah, it sounds like there's some things to think about there.
I'll do it, Brian. Thanks for raising that point.
Okay, it seems as though we do have consensus on moving the package, though. That doesn't seem controversial. As far as the rest, I think we could fill up the rest of the hour talking about it, so that's a good reason to move on.
Great.
So you have one more bullet point, Fred.
Sorry. So thanks for the vote. The other question I have before 4 is also about the two renderer, let's call it like that are in core currently. It's a VDOM package and Vega package. I propose to move them to the Jupyter renderer, not for the same reason. VDOM is because VDOM is not maintained any longer, and there has been a boat update for IPyWidget 8, and it seems that when we update to IPyWidget 8, then VDOM doesn't work any longer. I didn't look at the detail, but that one seems to not be compatible any longer. And Vega, it's related to some recent contribution that proposed to update, because there is a new version of Vega Lit, I think Vega Lit 5. And the question is like, if we move it to Jupyter renderer, it will be also maybe a better history to say, user story to say, okay, you can pick up the one that you are using actually, and so we can provide different versions for the user.
I can help out with this since I am doing something very similar, which is kind of doing the inverse of that, moving the MathJax 3 package away from Jupyter renderers into JupyterLab. So with the Vega extension, will we need to add a version number to the package? So that way users can choose which version they want to install over.
And are we also proposing that as of JupyterLab 4, JupyterLab won't ship with the Vega extension by default?
That's my question, yes. Should we ship one or not, basically?
Well, I mean, I have mixed feelings on this. I'm one of the co-creators of Altair, and so we really wanted to advocate for Vega as a multi-stakeholder open specification for visualizations that wasn't sort of owned by a single party, and we felt like that was important. At the same time, Jupyter traditionally is not bet on a single, vendor's the wrong word, it's not a product. I don't know, I'm mixed on this. I'm a little worried about breaking the experience for users that use Altair and expect this to work. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm in the same state as you. Like for VDOM, I think it was more like a demonstration of fun thing to do, but for Vega,
yeah, I think, I mean, Altair is very, very popular these days, and so I'm guessing it's getting a lot of usage. At the same time, I do know that the Altair folks have worked hard to make sure that Altair works through other display mechanisms. The existing Vega extension works through a MIME type, whereas Altair now has pretty solid support for being able to display using a standard JavaScript MIME type as well. So maybe it's not the end of the world.
so I will open an issue on the Vega specifically too, so that we can discuss and trace that.
Thanks. On Team Compass or JupyterLab?
I think it makes more sense to place it on Team Compass for those kind of.
Thanks.
And that's it for me. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Fred. Sorry, I'm losing my voice. Should have worn a mask. Brian, you're up.
Yeah, hi everyone. So I'm gonna paste this into the chat. My team at AWS has been working on this generative AI extension for JupyterLab that enables end users to perform tasks using these generative AI models, tasks such as selecting a block of code and having the model refactor that code or debug it, or create a markdown cell that explains the code. Originally, we were proposing to incorporate it sort of permanently into the JupyterLab org after talking more with a number of you and also some folks from the Software Steering Council and EC. Our sense is that for the time being, the best place for this is the Jupyter Incubator program. This is certainly early stage exploratory work. It's not stable, mature. So the only hitch with that is that the incubator program is sort of on pause and hasn't been updated to the new governance model. And so the EC and SSC are going to work over the next few months to relaunch that program. And I think that would be a good place for this. So what I've done is I've changed the vote to be a temporary adoption of JupyterLab of this repo to enable us to work in the open and collaborate with folks, but only until the incubator program is launched, at which point we would move it over to the incubator program. And yeah, any questions, thoughts?
As one of those people in that long discussion about whether it should be in the incubator, thanks for the update. It's now a yes for me, and I was definitely leaning towards solid no before, so.
And perhaps to add a bit of context for folks who were not yesterday in the office hours of the Executive Council, we discussed this quite a bit there. And the idea is that this should serve as a good kind of prompt to really update the incubator like model and machinery. It's not quite ready, so there's no point in really sending this package out there when that mechanism right now has a bunch of things that like are not even viable because they refer to the previous governance. But we do think that that mechanism makes sense for the project at large, and this will be an incentive to do that. On Friday, we have the first joint meeting of the EC and the new SSC. This would fall kind of squarely under the purview of activities of the SSC. So it'll be a good motivator to get that particular wheel in motion, and the mechanisms for the EC to coordinate that with the SSC are like, as I said, our first meeting is in 2 days. So I'm kind of optimistic that this is a pretty reasonable thing to do, and that it's a good forcing function, if nothing else, to say, oh, like, yeah, let's get this done, so that this one and others, another one was already mentioned in the issue, how Steve mentioned 2 packages from Jupyter Server that are being handled similarly, so that they all have a good home. So that's just kind of to give a bit of context.
Just a procedural question. Can we consider an alternative to the list of everyone's names and the yes, no, abstain way of voting? Even something as simple as switching to emojis or something. I don't know. I've always found this, watching the votes trickle in process, a little discomforting myself.
Let's bring that up as a separate issue on Zoom Compass.
100%, not this issue. Yeah.
I mean, absolutely, it's worth considering that. Are there any other points of input, thoughts, questions about either what we're doing with this extension or sort of the questions around where it goes?
I actually just thought of like 2 points around the where it goes side of things. While it's temporarily in JupyterLab org, do we want to mark it in some way as incubating, like in the name, in the docs?
Yeah, I was thinking that. I think both in the subtitle of the repo, at the top of the README, yeah, we should mark it as incubating and experimental. That completely makes sense.
And then the second thing, I guess, should be forwarded to the steering council when they discuss this, whether or not incubating projects, because I'm assuming they're going to be under Jupyter incubating, if they should be somehow earmarked to which org they're trying to get into out of the incubator.
Yeah, so the previous Jupyter incubator required the incubating project to name a sponsor on the Jupyter Steering Council. And something that we started to talk about in the Executive Council office hours yesterday was exactly what you're saying, to say, let's replace that by a sponsoring sub-project that would, in most cases, probably be the eventual target of it. And so we need to work through that with the EC and the SSC, but I think that makes a lot of sense.
Okay. Yeah, I've worked with both Apache and Linux Foundation incubator projects, and I know in Apache it's just all one tunnel. Goes there's no sub anything, but with Linux, each project has its own incubator, which is, in my opinion, total overkill, and it has its own problems. So I do like this idea of having one incubator, but making sure they have paths towards specific projects.
And if folks have input about the incubator program or how it should work, we will likely be discussing that in the Executive Council office hours that are Tuesday mornings at 10 a.m. Pacific. And so, feel free to jump on there and chat with the EC and others about this. And then there'll also be PRs coming to the governance repo to change the process.
And Brian, this makes me think that we should, and I can take care of that, open an issue kind of about the future of the incubation program in there, so that people can leave comments asynchronously and whatnot. But I'm going to drop the link to the office hours so that people have it handy. It's in the calendar, but.
And I think we would love to see. I think this is I'm speaking on behalf of the EC. We'd love to see the incubator program be fairly lightweight, so that the bar for projects to incubate is not really high and people don't do it. I think in the past it probably was that way, and people felt like it was too much bureaucracy. And I think a model that's more closely aligned with how some of the contrib orgs are working, where it's lightweight. We just want to make sure there's a clear governing structure, so clear decision-making body, that the code of conduct is present and enforced, things like that. So, yeah. How do people feel about taking a read on consensus here on the generative AI repo versus doing a full vote again?
Okay, so to rephrase that, how about we do a thumbs up, smell test, and if it turns out we have consensus, we don't need a vote, and if we don't, we do. So who is okay with the proposal to take the generative AI repos, move them to Jupyter Incubator, with the understanding that we, the JupyterLab project, are sponsoring that, and that the graduation from the incubator will be to one day reside in the JupyterLab org. So thumbs up for that, or thumbs down.
Aaron, hold on.
Yeah.
I think based on our decision-making process, if someone proposes a vote, we should have it.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking.
Oh, sure.
Proposing a vote. So let's just do that. Totally.
Okay, cool.
All right. So I've actually already updated the vote, so it will close next Wednesday, end of the day, anywhere on Earth. So thank you, everyone. Really appreciate the input and helping us get through this.
Great. Thanks, Brian. Okay, let's move on. The next person on the agenda is Jason Weil.
Hey, good morning, good evening, everyone. So we've got right now over 100 issues that are open against JupyterLab's milestone 400. We're hoping to have this, the milestone I've been using, or the timeline I've been using, is that we want to have 4.0 out and generally available by JupyterCon, which is in early May. So the question then becomes, like, how are we gonna decide what is gonna go in and what is not? And we talked last week about devoting a half hour of this hour-long session to triage. We're already at 35 minutes past the hour, so I'm not sure how much time people want to dedicate for real, because we've also got some other items on the agenda. What do folks think? Want to do like 15 minutes, 10 minutes?
How about we do the other agenda items quickly and devote the rest of the call to triage?
Okay, let's proceed then with Darian, you're next up on the list.
Okay, I linked a PR that has a change in the running sidebar for kernels that I've been working on recently with a lot of help. And the main thing to point out is that the concept of what you see in the running kernels dropdown in JupyterLab 3.x has always been active sessions connected to a kernel. So here's a notebook connected to a kernel. So you would see the notebook. And here's a console connected to a notebook, to a kernel, and you see that. And if you have two active sessions, which you can do by opening a notebook, then independently opening a console, then going to that console and saying switch to using the kernel for the notebook that I opened previously. You'll see two items under the list of kernels, even though it's actually one kernel. And so if you hit the X on the console, you'll actually kill the kernel in your notebook as well. So now this new UI instead shows a list of running kernels, and there's an indented tree structure where beneath each kernel shows the active sessions for that kernel, and you can kill the kernel with the understanding that everything in that all of its child activities are going to go with it. And also, now this isn't a feature that ships with Jupyter Server, but if you have a server like say Jupyterverse, that when you hit the API/kernels REST endpoint, it lists kernels that might not be ones created by the Jupyter server, might be running in another application. If it has some way of picking those up, it'll display those kernels for you too. And there's a new context menu on running kernels. You can right click on a running kernel and say, give me a new notebook connected to this kernel, or give me a new console connected to this kernel. So if you have an application that creates Jupyter kernels, you can open up a notebook connected to a running kernel, modify its state, and the application will reflect that. This isn't a feature we're gonna be super quick to release. I imagine we'll have to talk about it in Jupyter Server, and it'll at the very least be a point release, a minor release, because it's strictly speaking, it's a, well, actually it's not an API change, but it's a behavior change. So we'd probably put it behind a 2.1 or something. But you don't need that feature to still see a newly reorganized kernels panel in the left-hand sidebar. And that's it. It'll be in the next alpha and you can play with it. And if you don't want to play with it, if you go to my PR, I made a screencast so you can see a video of what it looks like. And that's all I have. So Andrew, you're up.
Hey, so there was a live discussion with Mike. So Mike says that he like already replied, and as far as I understood, he also self-requested a review just now. So I think we can skip my topic and we can take it offline and rather just spend time on triaging the 4.0 issues maybe. So thanks everyone.
Okay, great. We do have a bullet point under additional discussions. Who added this, and is this something that we should talk about now? Should we leave it for next week? What do you think?
Frederick's name is on 13746, the issue that's listed. I don't know whether Frederick actually added that.
Okay, why don't we take this up next week then? If no one's claiming it, now's not the time. So I'll pass it over to Jason W.
Hello, everyone. Once again, as I mentioned before, we had 135 issues that are open against the 400 milestone, and we are using JupyterCon, which is in early May, as our kind of guidepost for when we'd like to have releasable version. Releasable version doesn't necessarily mean we have 0 bugs in it or 0 items in it, but we might want to take a look. I've been kind of focusing on the bugs first, but there are also maintenance and enhancement requests in there. I've done a little bit of spot triage myself, but I'm open to suggestions as to how we should attack some of the items that are in need of review on this call. And by review, I mean, should we accept them continuing to be on 400, or should we move them to another future milestone? Should I filter to bugs first?
Well, could you filter by unassigned? Because maybe the ones that are assigned, we can revisit at a later date. Presumably someone's at least thinking about it, but the ones that are unassigned, we might just realize no one's going to work on this and we move them to 4.1 or something.
What's the search syntax for is unassigned?
On the drop down,
actually,
if you go back on the right hand side next to the sort
assignee.
button.
Thank you.
And the other thing, we could sort by from the oldest to the newest.
Okay. Good idea. So yeah, I actually went through some of the really old ones a while back, and some of them were actually already fixed, but many of them are not. So this is the oldest one, which is tagged still needs discussion, even though it's over 5.5 years old at this point. But versioning document models. So is this still something that we're targeting for 4.0? There hasn't been discussion in nearly 2 years. It says we just merged our RTC model implementation.
I think we can close it. If that should happen now, the document structure actually is described as a YGS document and it's no more in JupyterLab core.
Okay.
Can we add, can you, Frederick, add a comment there?
Yep.
To describe why it was closed?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So keyboard shortcuts. This person, Wes Turner, wants a list of keyboard shortcuts to pop up. Someone is working on integrating a more graphical keyboard shortcut editor. Much similar project would be to make a table of existing keyboard shortcuts. So this is Jason Grout's last comment from September 2019. There's a pull request that was opened in draft in August of last year that fixes 4004. And I asked last week, is this still targeted for this version? But I didn't get any responses.
No. There's your response. Unless somebody, I can't pick it up. So if somebody else can pick it up, great. But it looks like.
So, I'm sorry to cut you off, but I think this was fixed by the setting editor now having keyboard shortcuts in it, though, wasn't it?
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing.
It's not exactly.
Yeah, the request is to add a keyboard shortcuts user interface that displays in the same way as the famous question mark key in Gmail does. Like, give me a quick cheat sheet of all my keyboard shortcuts.
Or actually what we have in classical notebook.
Yeah, and Jupyter Notebook is the more direct comparison.
And the idea here is these are keyboard shortcuts that are context aware of wherever you are in the UI. So wherever you are in the UI, you can hit this question mark and it'll say what keyboard shortcuts are available to you right now, since we have keyboard shortcuts that can depend on where you are.
Okay, so does anyone intend to work on this? Because this sounds like an awesome feature, but if no one's going to work on it, let's move it to 4.1 and carry on.
I've actually been moving stuff out to the future milestone if no one's picking up.
Yeah, that's better.
I'm happy to pick it up if if the one is working.
Are you happy to pick it up?
Feature, yeah, it's
for
a
4.0?
feature priority. Yeah.
You
If
want
it's
to,
just finishing up this PR.
okay, well then I'll assign.
And then Mike, if you find that it's more work than you thought, or if it's not going to make the cutoff, then feel free to move it.
Sure.
Okay. All right. So let's move on to 4254, another one by Jason Grout. By the way, if you enjoy this, plug for, we do triage every week for new issues on Thursdays at 10 a.m. Pacific. Would be happy to have you there. Offer open with in the tab context menu for documents. We can click on a document tab and get a new view with the same viewer. Matthias points out it would be a very natural workflow to get an open with option to easily look at an open file with a different viewer.
Isn't this already possible? I think they're.
Yeah, but not in the tab.
Oh,
In the file browser only.
in a tab context menu. Okay.
Which is horrible UX, because if your file browser is, if you have a document from a different location of the file system, you basically need to go to the file browser, re-navigate to the place where that thing was opened originally, open it, and then you've lost your location of the file browser. This has been a big pet peeve of mine when using it in teaching, and so I would root very, very heartily for this getting fixed. It's kind of a massive pain in my ass.
Okay, so with that endorsement in mind, Jeremy commented last March, if anyone would like to work on this, he put it in the 4.0 milestone. So now comes the conversation of like, would anyone like to work on this?
What's the time frame?
So feature freeze for notebook lab 4 features is February 28th.
So 1 month, 4 weeks, almost exactly.
Yeah.
I'm happy to review.
My guess is there's a lot of these issues like this, and maybe it's better for us to asynchronously say, hey, does anybody want to pick up any of these issues in the next week? And if no, and whoever has not picked up an issue in the next week gets moved to the future milestone or something.
I mean, I'd be happy to do that, Jason. It's just like, you know, are people going to be willing to commit to look through this between now and next week?
If they're committing to work on it in the next 4 weeks, I think that would be the first sign of commitment to work on it in the next 4 weeks. We could just take these issues and en masse move them to a new milestone, which is 4.1 probation or provision or something, provisional or something.
I mean, keep in mind, Jason, that many of the issues that are currently on 4.0, I saw a few that were literally originated in the 1X series, and then you can see in the GitHub history, move to 2, 2.1, 2.2, 2.3. It's like the world's slowest auction. It's so, like, you know, do I hear 4.1, 4.2? Eventually, you got to say, look, we're just going to move this to future, and you're going to pull it in.
That's right. So I think that, I mean, we've got 4 weeks to work. If you know you can commit in the next 4 weeks, then great, because really that means maybe 2 weeks and then fixing bugs and stuff like that. So I would suggest having an opt-in versus an opt-out sort of philosophy with these issues, in that if someone is motivated to pick up one of these issues, then great. And we just sort of en masse move all the issues out of 4.0 into 4.0 provisional, and people pull in whatever issues they want to make sure that they're going to work on.
Okay.
So how many issues are in the future milestone? Because the problem with moving issues that we're not taking on right at the moment to the future milestone is that if the future milestone has like 1,000 issues in it,
it's the
pretty
dumping
close
ground.
to 1,000.
It's the wish
right.
list. Yes.
Because that's basically saying won't fix, right? Like if it's buried in a mountain of 1,000 issues, it's very unlikely, like practically speaking here.
Yes.
I know it's not the same as like explicitly saying we won't fix this, but practically speaking, putting it into
it actually fulfills a different function too, though. When we come to figuring out what we want to do for JupyterLab 5, there's a very high likelihood that some of the things we're thinking about, there's already an issue. And so whoever raises, oh, we should do this open with context menu for the tabs in JupyterLab. Whoever raises that issue as a 5.0 like to have is going to find it as a pre-written issue sitting in that milestone. So you're right, there's a lot in there and many will never actually be implemented, but almost all of the next version's features are probably also in there and they will be extracted.
Okay. If there's a established process for doing that, then that's fine.
So I would flip this conversation as, are there issues that people know that they're going to work on and then move everything else out to like a provisional milestone for the next week? And next week we say, okay, what features have moved from the provisional milestone into 4.0 as something definitely that is planned to be worked on. And then everything else gets moved to the future.
I had a question. From these 110 open issues, are all issues like a priority for 4.0? Because this is the biggest question for me whenever I look through the issues to choose an issue to work on. Like, I'm not sure, for example, like mobile problems are as priority as like keyboard shortcuts problems. So I don't know, from my point of view, it would be really useful to throw out issues that are not priority for 4.0 or mark those that are priority for 4.0. So I could work, or other people could work on them with the first priority, so to speak. That's just my advice.
So I think the ones, if there are any left, that have feature parity labels, those are pretty high priority because we've always intended JupyterLab to have feature parity with Notebook. And so this keyboard overlay thing has been an oversight for quite some time, simply because Notebook has had the feature. I don't know if we have other feature parity ones there, but that's one good metric.
If I may add a comment, when I think of this problem, I actually think of two different criteria. Priority is a ranking decision. You're ranking things, and this is high priority. And as Jason said, different people have different senses. But I think to me, what's important is to know, is an issue high impact for someone? Now, the team may say, look, we're sorry we can't fix it. But knowing whether it has high impact for a specific use case helps inform whether to prioritize it or not, right? And so I think it would be valuable to say some of these issues, well, yes, I mean, it would be nice to have, but it's going to not be no big deal. Others, they are very high impact. It would be good if it could be prioritized. It doesn't make it automatically high priority, but it signals and helps making that decision. And I think understanding the difference between those two is useful. For example, in the open with one, like I can demonstrate that it is high impact for a use case. It may not matter for a different one, right? But signaling that can help them make the prioritization decision for the entire team on like what is considered a blocker and whatnot. Where should we like all hands on deck and fix that versus, you know, it'll come when it comes, nice for a sprint or whatever.
Okay, we are currently at 53 minutes past the hour. I wanted to close out this conversation that we'd started about 4254, and then we can consider going forward with like this mass move proposal of like, if you haven't claimed something, we're just going to move it to this provisional milestone. I'll say 6 days from now, so that we can revisit this next Wednesday.
Wait, so how do people say they claim? I'm thinking just move everything to the provisional milestone now, and you claim it by moving it back to 4.0.
I mean, there's also an assign option. We filtered out things without an assignee.
Okay. Yeah, so as long as it's clear how to claim things, that's great.
Well, also, Jason, like, how do we inform everybody in this community? Hey, you have 6 days to claim something by assigning it to yourself.
Also, you need to be authorized to assign an issue to yourself. Like,
Is
for
there a
example,
bot?
I cannot assign an issue to myself.
Is there
That's true.
a bot that can do it, actually? Can MeSeekSpot say, if you issue a command, can you assign something to yourself that way? I thought that was...
It should be, and it's a bit tricky because now GitHub allows a user to be assigned if he has at least commented once. So for example, if you are a new contributor and you never have commented on an issue you want to work on, you have at least to make one comment on the issue, and then we may allow the bot to assign issue. But for now, I don't think he has the feature.
Let's make the bar that low. If you want to work on a feature, comment on it. And then it's easy for us to sort by issues that have been recently updated to get these comments out.
Okay, so the question though is, how do we communicate that to,
Well,
are we going to tweet it? Are we going to post it on Discourse? Like, this is something we could spend another several hours talking about, is like, how do we inform the community of
well,
this
this is
call
a
to
good
action?
start.
Yeah.
And putting it in the notes here. Yeah, a Team Compass issue.
We have a 4.0 issue already for JupyterLab that people watch, even if they don't comment. It won't catch everyone, but it'll catch some asynchronous people too.
Okay. Can you drop a link to that in the chat, please, Isabella?
Yep.
Thank you.
So
And
maybe
and
another.
people can move things from future to 4.0 too. Like, it's not the end of the world if we move it to future and then somebody's like, wait, no, I really wanted that feature. Well, fine, we'll put it back in 4.0. It's just about cleaning up the 4.0 milestone.
Also, like in these hundreds of issues, there are like maybe 100 issues. There are probably going to be very few that are going to be picked up and resolved by the feature freeze. So JupyterCon is not just a deadline for releasing JupyterLab 4. Like, presumably we should release JupyterLab 4 long enough before JupyterCon that we can also have Notebook 7 by then, and a bunch of extensions. So like, for me, the calendar is really like, we mostly work on consolidation right now. Have a beta in the end of the month. And then we have a few weeks to go through the release cycle, to the release candidate cycles, so that in end of March, early April, we have a final 4 and move on to upgrading all of the extensions and release Notebook 7. Like, the schedule is very tight. And if any of these issues require significant work, then it's very, very unlikely that any of this will land by 4.
So I think that what Mike is saying in the chat makes some sense. Basically, we should go through the issues painfully on a call, because that's how to get the most exposure to them. That's how to find out that there's no actual interest in doing them. And we should probably do this a couple more times between now and the end of the month. And at some point, switch not just to looking at who wants to claim this before the end of the month, to these open issues that have assignees. Hey, are you going to finish by the end of the month? You know, maybe like we have a February 15th check-in or something. That is, you have 2 weeks until feature freeze. Do you think you're going to make it? If you're not, that's totally fine. Just do it either in a patch release if that's what you think, or if it's a feature and you're happy to wait to 4.1, move it to that. But we probably ought to go through the slow process of lots of us looking at these, because I also am skeptical that people are gonna just trawl through that issue list and do it on their own. And we are talking a tight time frame, as Sylvan says.
Yeah.
So I propose next week we basically do this exercise again, and the week after we do this exercise again, and the week after I'm off, so you guys can do whatever you want, and the week after that we're done, right? Because that's the end of the month. So
to be clear, because we're nearing the top of the hour here, I'm going to move all unassigned 4.0 issues to I'm going to call it new milestone, provisional milestone. And then next week, we're going to review that. At some point, we're going to have to start reviewing presently assigned issues on 4.0 as well.
Well, maybe 4.1 is a good place to put it, because anything in 4.1 is something that by nature can go into 4.0 before we finalize. So all these issues, we can optimistically say they're 4.1 issues unless somebody's volunteering to do them in the next 27 days. And we don't need to create a new milestone for that. And once 4.0 is out, they'll already be in the right place.
Okay.
And you think that's not a bug? It really doesn't have to be fixed.
Yeah. That's
so
true.
Next week, should we focus on the bugs that are assigned for 4.1 then, and decide and ask for each of them? Should we pull this into 4.0?
Yeah, I think that's right. But I don't think Sylvan was specifically saying, he was just saying critical path to release are bugs. Any features are nice to have at this point. Is that what you meant, Sylvan?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, okay.
And if any of you feel like taking on one of these, like prioritize bugs, because like there is a temptation to say, yeah, I'm going to squeeze in some new feature by 4.0. But I think if we continue delaying, I mean, it's been 2.5 years in the making. If we continue delaying 4.0, the pace of development is just going to slow, like at some point. Slow
Okay,
down.
it is the top of the hour. I want to stop recording. We can continue the conversation. Mike, do you need what you're about to say to be on the recording, or is it okay to stop? Okay, cool. All right, everyone brace yourselves.